Hi everyone, this next project is titled Statistical Analysis of Methamphetamine Lab Busts in West Virginia, USA with ArcGIS. And the purpose of this presentation is to introduce you to the project we'll be working on for the next few weeks and to provide an overview of what to expect. The second video in this module I'll provide will be focused on analysis. Here's just a brief overview of what I'll cover in this presentation. You might be asking, why drug addiction and meth? Creating new projects based on current events and compelling studies is a highlight in my career. I'm almost always cooking up a new lab, either for the courses I teach or for other courses we offer here at UWF. And just for fun, I'll give you a peek into how I came up with this one and why. At the 2012 American Association of Geographers, I was handed this book on geography and drug addiction. Not because I'm super special, but because they were being handed out to everyone who would take one. Well, right away the title caught my attention. It occurred to me that I'd never really thought about mapping drug addiction. Sure, I thought about drug trade and crimes associated with it, but never addiction. Being the nerd that I am, I brought it to Tybee Island with me on one of the short excursions I made with other fellow geographers, and what I found, aside from a beautiful island, is that this text is actually a compilation of studies and journal articles related to the topic of geography and drug addiction. For the most part, these are scientific journal articles, meaning they explain a great deal about the background and methods used for analysis. Example papers include the spatial context of adolescent alcohol use, using GIS to identify drug markets and reduce drug-related violence, and spatial analytic approaches to explaining the trends and patterns of drug overdose deaths. Feel free to follow the link provided here for a full listing, but at least you get an idea of the types of articles that are in there. So back in the office, I discovered the price of this thing was over $100. What a deal! I vowed that I absolutely had to create a project from this book, for if not anything else then for good karma. I quickly narrowed my drug addiction project of choice to one that is very similar to the study provided as a required background reading for this project, entitled Spatial Patterns of Clandestine Methamphetamine Labs in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Why didn't I sign this article instead? Well, that's another story that stems from UWF not owning a subscription to the journal this thing is published in. I also found that meth lab bus locations were readily available for download from the DEA website and various state sources. The state of West Virginia was chosen for its high rate of lab seizures and readily available data. Now, aside from fulfilling karma and access to wealth of these data, I thought about how I'd heard more and more about meth in the news and the tragic stories and horrid photos being behind the quote, faces of meth. I know you've all seen them, I'm sure. It's a drug that impacts more than the user, and it's being made in people's homes, maybe next door, down the road, or even a hotel room. So due to the highly volatile state of meth during production, innocent bystanders could easily be caught in an unexpected explosion. I've heard from people over time telling me about someone they know getting caught up in meth and the terrible side effects. In fact, since 2012, I've dealt with 2 extended family members who suffered from drug addiction. So yeah, this is a serious topic worth looking into. If GIS can be used to assist law enforcement with cracking down on meth and saving lives, I'm in. Well, during my research, I found a very informative and sort of fun site to look at covering all things meth. It's the methproject.org site, created by the Meth Project Foundation. It's a compilation of facts and short animated clips that makes for easy viewing and learning. This first story is about a teenager named Ashley who describes her experience with meth and having the feeling of bugs crawling under her skin, or crank bugs. The takeaway from all of this is that users are drawn to the drug for the feeling of increased alertness, general sense of well-being, exhilaration or euphoria, to the exact opposite feeling. And those feelings of intense positive feelings fade to extreme fatigue, depression, agitation, paranoia, hallucination, rage, and violence. Since the drug alters the natural brain chemistry, addiction is very strong and hard to escape. Now, before we dive into how we can predict where meth labs are located and the associated analysis, we need to cover some basics about meth. You'll be required to define meth and describe it in a way that is relevant to our project in your final paper with regards to the production, the use, demographics, and some details about the side effects, both physical and environmental. Perhaps you've learned all you think you need to know about meth production from the popular AMC TV series Breaking Bad, and that might be true, and I certainly can't promise that what I have to say will be nearly as entertaining. Well, maybe this first nugget of fact is. Meth was first discovered in Japan and was used during World War II to keep kamikaze pilots awake. So we have an aircraft loaded with explosives and tweaked out pilots making deliberate suicidal crashes. Meth contains stimulant properties similar to adrenaline that lasts for about 6 hours or more, so yeah, I can see the connection there. A little scary. Here in the US, it started in the 60s with biker gangs. They transported it around in their crank cases, which helped give one of its nicknames. Well, all I can think about now is the Sons of Anarchy. I know it's a ridiculous show, but still entertaining. Since the 60s, meth has made its way across the US and is found in nearly every state. Well, yeah, every state. Not one state is immune. So where is meth now? It's been popular in the news, and this compilation of stories provided by the Meth Project is sure to raise eyebrows. Nearly every day, there is a story or multiple stories posted. From the Geography of Drug Addiction article, authors found that the lab distribution in Colorado Springs, Colorado, shows that meth labs are clustered in and around the downtown area. They tend to be found in neighborhoods with a young and predominantly white population, small household size, and low education levels. Okay, that's something. We can find these data, but we need to know more about the process. Still looking at the Colorado case, authors reported in 2002 that 5.3% of the total U.S. population reported having used methamphetamine in their lifetime. I don't remember being asked, but maybe one of those forms from the doctor's office? It remains a mystery to me. In 2000, law enforcement seized over 7,000 pounds of meth nationwide. So we can estimate that about 1.5 million people regularly use this highly addictive narcotic. Unlike other illicit drugs like cocaine and heroin, methamphetamine is easy to manufacture in makeshift labs. The ingredients are readily available household chemicals like acetone-based nail polish remover, ether, iodine, lithium. Yeah, I have a few of those batteries. Methanol, muriatic acid, red phosphorus, not sure what that could be, lye, drain cleaner, and brake cleaner, anhydrous ammonia, otherwise known as fertilizer, and over-the-counter cold and allergy medications containing pseudoephedrine. What's more, producers can find recipes for cooking meth on the internet. The ease of making meth has encouraged users to establish labs here in the US in order to meet their own needs and to sell for profit. The startup cost of a small lab is generally only a few $100s in chemicals and supplies, from which they can then make thousands of dollars worth of street value in meth. Again, if you watch Breaking Bad, then you probably already know these things. But did you know that thousands of these homegrown labs have been seized? Busted. Labs come in various shapes and forms, from suitcase-sized labs in car trunks to those in garages, basements, and warehouses. Labs have been found in many different places, but most of them were located in residential areas. Now, the nature of these labs, especially those found in trunks, make it difficult for law enforcement to track. Often labs are uncovered when law officials go to homes that emit unusual or strong odors. They have blacked out or foiled windows, generate excessive and odd trash, there's constant activity and suspicious behavior, or when they investigate incidences of domestic violence, explosion, and fire. All of these relevant details help us build a data set. So far, we have demographics, where most labs are found, and we know manufacturers need convenient access to stores for supplies. As this article from Georgia Research Institute describes, methamphetamine labs, from the small-time labs referred to as mom and pop or Beavis and Butthead labs to super labs. I promise I'm not making this up. Super labs are mainly found in California, Mexico along the California border, and the Southwest, producing 10 or more pounds of meth each day. Well, this might explain why we see more lab busts in other states, right? I assume these super labs control the market in California. The Colorado-based article found that about half of the drug is smuggled in from Mexico from super labs. While the mom-and-pop labs represent only a minor source of meth in the U.S., they pose a significant threat to public safety and the environment. To get an idea of what a mom and pop meth lab looks like, take a look at this short video of police serving a search warrant at a household garage in Galesburg, Illinois. And that brings us to what's concerning about meth in those mom and pop labs we'll be focusing our analysis on. Of course, there are physical and mental concerns surrounding the use of the drug, which are very well explained on the methproject.org site. It goes further than that. There are serious environmental concerns, risks, and management issues associated with the production and the cleanup or lack of cleanup associated with these labs. Environmental problems arise from the haphazard use and improper disposal of the ingredients used to make meth. Essentially, a mixture of nasty chemicals are being poured down the drains and wells or dumped on the ground in backyards, along roadways, and so on, resulting in contaminated soil and groundwater. It's sourced in this article and others I read that for every pound of meth produced, approximately 6 pounds of hazardous waste are generated. Just wow. So, do you think we can link contamination with meth using GIS? You bet. We need a team of scientists willing to get dirty or hope that the work has been done already, but it's definitely possible. From the CNN source, I was surprised to learn how expensive it is to clean up a meth lab. Stories associated with abandoned sites and the issues surrounding the sale of homes that were previously being used as a production lab are of particular interest. The CNN Money link will take you to a map showing meth labs per county, where Tulsa, Oklahoma takes the lead with 979 contaminated meth lab sites. This is another very interesting byproduct of meth. Here's an example of that map shown here. If you're asking yourself, I wonder who pays for the cleanup, who's responsible? You're barking up the right tree. Poor trees. If you would like to include some of these details in your paper, take a look at the article I've linked to here under Legal Issues and Real Estate Transactions. Your next question might be, how is the U.S. government responding? Several, but not all states, have started the response by enacting legislation to restrict the sale of ephedrine and pseudoephedrine between 2000 and 2005. In 2005, the federal government responded to the use of over-the-counter pills to manufacture meth with the Combat Methamphetamine Epidemic Act of 2005, which took effect in early 2006. You should have noticed allergy medications being pulled from the shelves and being replaced with a card saying "Request from Pharmacy," where then you would have to provide your driver's license or ID before purchasing. The pharmacist should have swiped your ID to be entered into a database. Officials can call up this database when needed. For a general overview of the Act and course of action associated with it, I've linked to a DEA article describing rules and regs for the sale of over-the-counter cold medicine. Bringing it back to GIS in more familiar territory, I've located the following resources to help make the connection. The first resource is, I think, a killer presentation given by a student from the University of Kansas during a GIS Day celebration. As a side note, GIS Day happens every November, and I hope you've marked your calendars. If not, please stop this presentation and make it happen. Okay, so like I said, the student did an awesome job of presenting this, and I hope you'll watch the presentation and aspire to report your findings for this report in a similar way, except on paper. For other examples of GIS being used to locate meth labs, I was able to locate a few articles easily using Google Scholar search for locations in Colorado, West Virginia, and California. For sites not offering full access to articles, I found that UWF Library subscribes to many journals. Remember, as a current student, you can access journals and other references through UWF's online library. Now, you aren't required to locate additional resources for this project, but I thought I'd point out that other scholarly journal articles do exist. The article I've selected as a required reading is comparable to the paper I read from the Geography of Drug Addiction text, but it's much broader focused, geographically speaking, since it looks at the entire U.S. versus one state or city. This paper is written by Ralph Weisenheit, I hope I'm saying that right, and Edward Wells of Illinois State University, titled Methamphetamine Laboratories, The Geography of Drug Production. When looking at the nation as a whole, they utilized 14,448 seized meth labs and documented association between the presence of meth labs and economic factors, social factors, and crime. As a whole, they found a spike in lab busts after the stricter regulations were in place that I mentioned previously. They also looked at county-level data and found that economic instability, nor spatial variables, acted as good predictors of the presence of meth lab seizures. Basically, there isn't a clear formula we can use saying if A, B, and C are present, then meth lab seizures or meth labs are present. Keep in mind as you're reading that we're working with meth lab seizures and not active meth labs. In general, lab seizure rates were higher in counties with a predominantly white, English-speaking population with a substantial number of evangelical churches. They also tended to have employment based on manufacturing, a larger farm population, single female-headed households, more radically segregated communities, and have a population that moved into the household within the past year. This paper looked at the whole nation and has basically found that meth labs aren't random. In fact, they show regional variations. What do I mean by that? Well, it's like turning on the TV or radio and listening to a show geared to a regional population, things you're likely interested in. So even though we don't have a perfect formula, we can make predictions with a certain level of confidence at the regional level. But as a whole, in the US, most meth lab seizures are found in regions where manufacturing employment is high. Strongest social factors were urban areas showing highly racially segregated communities of largely white, native-born residents, and in areas of evangelical churches. Interesting, right? As with all GIS projects, data is key. I was able to locate several sites hosting meth data usable in a GIS with minimal processing or data entry required. The DEA site is the most popular, and you'll find it referenced in the required paper. For this project, I provide all the data that you need, but if you're interested in finding meth lab seizure data in a location near you, these provide a good starting point. They also give you an idea of the sources I've leaned on to come up with this project and to give you a taste of what is out there. Each project I create involves a ton of research in the beginning. I lean on journal articles and white papers because they're very detailed and technical in nature. Not to mention most are peer-reviewed, meaning others agree with the methods used to come up with a result. Methods you can count on to likely work for you in a similar but different scenario. As you continue on your way, either as a working professional or with your master's degree, the importance of research, verification, and the ability to apply these vetted methods and adapt when necessary is really important. After reviewing the articles and resources, I found that most focus on lab busts and apply common statistical methods. So what is our end goal of this project? The takeaway can be narrowed down to two things. First, I want you to gain exposure to ArcGIS tools and common methods used in various fields, focusing on a real-world scenario. Second, I want to make sure you walk away with exposure reviewing peer-reviewed literature and applying those methods and techniques to a similar project. The Weishaupt and Wells paper, along with ArcGIS help guides, will be our main sources of reference to get through the project. I don't expect you to have previous experience or knowledge of statistics, and I don't expect you to walk away with a perfect result. In fact, there are no right answers to the final results in this project. This is a new and different concept. Again, the first goal is to gain exposure to these tools and common methods. I don't expect you to be a stats whiz at the end of this thing, but you should be able to explain the process and results you come up with. To me, that's the most important part of this project. Statistics are never 100% confident, so don't sweat it. Based on the course schedule alone, you'll notice I've provided extra time to complete this whole project. Due to the nature and the material of deliverables required, I found students need extra time to wrap their heads around the statistics and to write meaningful reports. Yes, I just said statistics and writing. These are two things I sometimes find hard to get excited about, but I've really tried to make this project as painless as possible. Also, I hope you'll surprise yourself by liking it, even if it's just a little bit. And if anything, I can pry you out of your comfort zone a little and you'll see what you're capable of. Prepare Week is dedicated to becoming familiar with the project by watching this lecture, reading the required article through the current study section, and becoming familiar with the data provided. For this whole project, you'll be writing a full paper, but I've broken it up so you're writing only small portions each week. For Prepare Week, I have you write the introduction and background sections, including a base map. Breaking up the paper this way allows you to get it done in smaller chunks and gain useful feedback from me for the final write-up. Your final grade for this project is mainly based on the paper and how well you've compiled, explained, and referenced. This is very different from previous assignments, and I can't stress enough the importance of asking someone to review your paper before submitting it and implementing feedback I provide for your final paper due with Report Week. Okay, so let's move on. Analyze Week. During Analyze Week, you'll read the methods section of the required article and a page from ESRI help focusing on regression and deciphering the ordinary least squares table. You'll also view a lecture I created on Introduction to Regression, where I try to explain the process of this whole thing in simple terms. Regression analysis is used to understand, model, and predict or explain complex phenomena, like why do we find meth lab seizures in specific areas? Because the spatial statistics tools are used for regression analysis and they're part of the ArcGIS geoprocessing framework, they're well documented and accessed in an easy and familiar fashion. During Analyze Week, you'll use the regression tool to create an ordinary least squares regression using a list of known variables. Variables you have data for, like age, sex, income, rate, etc. Basically, you'll input a list of variables, press a button, and a slew of results in the form of graphs and a table will appear. You'll follow a list of 6 checks to help determine which variables are helping or hurting your model. You know, the model that says, if you find A, B, C, and D, you will find meth labs. It's a little more complicated than that, and I'll explain all of this in more detail later, but this is just the gist of it. Report week is fairly light on the GIS side of things. This last section is devoted to wrapping up your analysis, describing results, and rewriting your paper for the final submission. Again, I don't expect results to be confident. I will look for a range of results, but those results will be based on the variables you choose to incorporate in your model. So you can expect your results to be different from your classmates. We've reached the end of this lecture. I've provided an introduction to the project, things to focus on, and an overview of the project in terms of what to expect. How about a few tips? I say this a lot, but it really is important to pace yourself and come up with an action plan for this week, or for this whole module. Extra time is provided, and I've done that because the time is needed to review materials, in some cases multiple times, and work through the project. It also gives more time for me to explain any sticky points. Analyze Week will be the most time-consuming part of the project to get through conceptually. I'm here to help, but like I said, it may require you to read and reread. If you aren't able to put in a good effort with a paper during Prepare and Analyze Week, you'll have really just a tough report week. It'll take you more time to go back and make changes. The paper claims a major portion of this project, so starting early and getting words on paper to work with so you can write and rewrite will be important. Sometimes just getting those words on the paper just to get a start is the hardest part. Okay, so I'll leave you now to work on the statistics lecture. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you online.